Is your spirit o'er attentive?
The man that hath known music in himself,
Nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils.
The motions of his spirit are dull as night, and his affections dark as Erebus.
Let no such man be trusted.
Music, hark! It is your music of the house. Methinks it sounds much sweeter than my day. Silence is stars that veil on it. How many things I
Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Taylor, and I'm the founding conductor of the Taylor Festival Choir. And today we have some of our artists with you, and we're going to talk about the making of our virtual recording of Vaughn Williams' Serenade to Music. This has been an interesting time, and interesting is a very kind way of putting, the past year and a half in the arts world. But I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, we hope. But we're still kind of in this predicament where there's no consistent choral singing in the world. And so we did this project. So let me just throw it out to all of you, and just whoever wants to start talking can just lead us off. What do all of you miss the most about live choral singing?
Not to be too direct about it, but I think just the live aspect. Especially through projects like this, whether it be through choral singing or through other virtual projects that I've done over the past year, it's kind of bittersweet in a way, because you obviously are happy to be making music, especially if it's music that you love. You're happy to be performing that music and learning that music and recording it because it gives you some kind of purpose throughout the day. But you don't get that feeling of actually doing it with people, and especially with choral music. At least for me, the most magical part of singing in a choir, especially like TFC, is being able to collaborate with all of these incredible musicians and just finding that blend and that kind of like harmonious sound.
Right.
And you don't really get that, unfortunately, in a virtual world where it's just you sitting in your apartment with a ring light, what have you.
Right.
For me, it's just being in the room with people, because when you make music together, it becomes this spiritual experience that you just don't get when you're hyper focused on what you're sounding like on a phone microphone or a computer microphone that you're going to send to somebody to edit into hopefully something that ends up coming together. And it becomes a whole lot more stressful than you would think when you're just doing it at home. Whereas there's the freedom of being in the room with people that you don't get when you're doing it this way.
Right. Grace, I saw you nodding your head.
I was agreeing with the stressful part that, when you're having to make these recordings, and you have just the recordings in general, there's such you want it to be perfect. You want it to be as close to perfect as possible. Of course, perfection is never attainable because we're human beings. But there's something about live performance where it's just, that's what it is. And, it passes, and it's fleeting. But with recordings, you could listen back and get very hypercritical about everything.
Right.
So.
Yeah, when you first said that, I wanted to say everything about it. I think for me, I realized how much I truly love the process. Like, the process is just as much as the performance. And it's not even just the collaborating with people in terms of getting to interact with other musicians in terms of learning from them and our relationships with each other, but it's also even simple things like listening for balance within your section, or listening for intonation within the section or between sections, phrasing organically because you're reacting to something that's been done. This is like, that stuff cannot be duplicated virtually. And for me, I think that's part of the magic.
No, I think that's well said, Maurice. And I think so on one hand, I think Sarah hit the nail on the head when she alluded to community. So one of the reasons we all love singing in a choir is it is a sort of community. Not just that you're in a room with other people, but you are singing oftentimes the same part with other people, and you're literally, as Bates mentioned, it's kind of a spiritual activity where your intellect and your heart and your spirit is commingling with others all in the moment. So that is one aspect of it. But there are some technical challenges too, and that's, I think, I did some singing in these projects as well, and I think that there's little things that Maurice has mentioned that we all do. I mean, everybody in this talk is a very fine soloist, and it's very easy when you sing in a virtual setting. You almost inevitably find yourself focusing on yourself, your own sound, and trying to sing in tune, but you're worried about your own tone. When you're in a choir, consciously and subconsciously, you wind up simultaneously listening to yourself, but you're listening to everyone around you just as ferociously. You're matching vowel, you're matching pitch, You're trying to make sure rhythmic precision's there, and sometimes even at a subconscious level, sopranos especially wind up matching vibrato rate, and that's something that I'm not even sure you think about. And I mentioned the sopranos because sopranos are higher than everybody else, so what they do is more easily audible than maybe some of the other parts. So, for instance, Sarah, you and Grace have still never sung together. So the first time y'all sing together, it will, first rehearsal, it'll take y'all a while to get used to singing together. Then by the performance, you will have started matching vowel and maybe even vibrato. And then after you've sung several projects together, like both of you have sung with say, for instance, Corey and Andrea Shulin quite a bit, the more you sing with somebody, the better you get at matching vowel, matching vibrato rate, all of those things. And that is something that I definitely think is missing. Bill, you are a choral singer, but you're also a pianist. So what has made this whole thing challenging for you?
I mean, all of the above, what they said. But just to be different, I'll also say, I mean, I miss having an audience, and I miss not only like we've concentrated on sharing with each other, and that is a wonderful and beautiful thing. But I also think then sharing that with an audience and having that immediate that energy, that exchange of energy that doesn't exist whenever you create that recording. And sure, they may love it and appreciate it, but it's not that same shared experience.
Right. So we're talking about what the challenges are with these virtual projects. But I think we would all agree that in a sense, they've saved us. I know that just having these projects to do has given me something to do. I have my college choirs and I have my Charleston Symphony Chorus, and we are rehearsing outside, that's a whole different animal, right? But with the TFC, there's just been no way to bring everybody together in this pandemic. So these projects have given me something to do just in terms of getting the music out, putting the marks in the music, then interacting with you guys, listening to you sing, just literally hearing your voices. It's nice to hear your voices again. And that's really helped me get through this difficult time. And I know some of y'all have been involved in some virtual projects as well. Just talk to me about how these virtual projects like the one we just did for Serenade to Music have helped you get through all this stuff.
Well, the first thing that I'll say is I've never done the Serenade to Music before. I know TFC did it a couple of years before I joined, but it's just a great work of art. Being able to do these projects, whether it's this one or some of the other projects that we and other people have been doing, it just still gives you an opportunity to explore a new piece of music, to explore a new style, to still make the music, whereas if we didn't have the ability to do the virtual projects, we would just be sitting at home doing nothing for a lot of the time.
So I've been pretty fortunate over the past year in that I've been able to do a few in-person gigs. Now, it's just once every few months that one comes up, and of course it's all masked, and it's just a handful of people, so all small ensemble things. But it's been great to have those, so just to kind of reawaken the spirit of like, okay, this is what I do, this feels right. But in the meantime, it's been nice to have these virtual projects, especially with TFC, where everyone's sending me their recordings and I'm piecing it all together and getting to have some sense of music making and collaboration going on.
Sarah, I know you've done a lot of these projects recently. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the rewards?
Ooh, so it's pretty even keeled. The challenges being that with all of the virtual projects that I've done, not one of them has ever really been the same. So like whenever I do one and then I go and do another one, I'm like, oh, I'm so prepared. I know how to hook this up. I know how to do this. And then they're like, okay, but wait, we're doing this entirely differently. So in November, I did a virtual Don Giovanni, which was completely live. We streamed it over YouTube, and every night was kind of a crossing our fingers, hoping that the accompaniment tracks would line up in our ears, that we wouldn't have any technical glitches, that someone's camera wouldn't zap out. But at the same time, being able to collaborate and actually to create a show during this time was so entirely rewarding. I lost so much work over this period, as I'm sure everybody did. So many performing opportunities. And, that's obviously being a performer isn't what makes us who we are, but it's a big part of our identity. So when I lost that stuff, I felt like I kind of lost part of myself. So being able to have the opportunity to create characters and to tell stories, even if it's in this virtual setting, has sort of outweighed any sort of technical glitches that can come along with this virtual environment. So yeah.
Right. Grace, you're also a professional opera singer, and you've been working quite a bit the last 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden that comes to a screeching halt, and then you start doing these virtual projects. So how has that maybe filled in the blanks for you?
I mean, I think it's just important to keep working. There's always things that we can be doing as opera singers. There's always text to be translated. There's always language to be more proficient at. So there's always things we could be doing. But again, just getting to be able to collaborate, even if it is virtually, it's still better than nothing, because otherwise it's really easy to kind of get really lazy and really unmotivated. And there were definitely times like that throughout the pandemic, but these little moments were kind of benchmarks where I could be like, okay, I at least have this that's coming up, or I have this
Right.
that's coming up.
So, Bill, for this Serenade to Music project, you had to play the piano. And just to share with our audience, I literally took the score and I conducted it and kind of sang the themes and sent it to Bill. And Bill tried to play along with that. What in the world was that like? I mean, I can't even imagine.
It was,
I'm hard enough to follow live. I can't even imagine.
it was very unique, and I had to do it. I mean, now that I've gotten used to following you live, but there's definitely something to be said for just the way it was and having a device here and trying to follow the music and looking at that. It was the first time I had done something that when I had done this. In this particular way, and so it was definitely a challenge, and I had to watch it over and over. I mean, it was definitely something I had to get used to what you were doing a lot.
And I will say that the TFC is doing some other virtual projects right now for an organization called Roots of Reform, and Bates is doing most of the editing for that. And we learned some lessons by doing Serenade to Music, that we changed the way we're doing some things. So we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing the Rob conducts it and sends it to somebody to watch. We dispensed with that.
A little fun tidbit for people about the Serenade recording. For when we were singing all the vocal parts, Steve and Hannah, who did all the editing, he had to record himself as a metronome along with Rob's conducting video going. And I just can't imagine having to do that.
If nothing else, we learn how to adapt.
It's difficult,
Gosh.
because, and then I learned the lesson, and I think Bates would agree with me. We decided it might actually make it easier if we had a quartet of singers record before everybody else and then sing, because it's so hard to blend with nothing. And when you hear other people singing, you just intuitively sing differently. And so we kind of learned that through the Serenade to Music, which we didn't do that. Everyone strictly recorded their part, including me. And then you tried to tune as good as you could, and you tried to imagine, am I singing in a way that's going to blend? I mean, a trained opera singer is going to sing, and all of us are trained opera singers, and you sing differently. You don't completely change the way you sing. You still breathe the same. You still resonate the tone. You still do the things that classical singers do, but you don't just rear back and let her rip when you're singing in a choir. But when you can't hear the other people, that's not available to you. And so that it's just almost impossible to have the kind of blend and tight intonation in a virtual project with the same people that you would have if you got them in the same room, because you would just immediately start tuning to one another, and that's not available to you virtually. So that's a major challenge. But on the flip side, I think it's great that we did these sorts of projects and could keep the music alive. I mean, that's what so many people that's kind of been a phrase I've heard so many people utter. We've just got to keep the music alive. We can't just hit pause on great music and just not have anything for a year or a year and a half.
That is one of the things about this that I do enjoy is there are people that, although I'm not getting to sing with them in the room, I'm still getting to see the final product and see them and sing with them. And that always brings back some, I don't want to say if it's nostalgia, but maybe that's the only way to really kind of describe it. But it brings back all of those feelings and memories and things that I appreciate about when I do actually get to sing with them. But, you're talking about the evolution of kind of recording a bit. And for me, it's been sort of a learning experience for me because I'm having to do a lot of the same kinds of things with my own kids in my own program. And so I don't know. I think it's also forcing us a little bit to adapt to what some 21st century things are for performing artists. And I think, there's some cons, but there are also some benefits. And I just think it's it's definitely a new era for all of us.
Well, and hopefully it can become a how do we use this technology and this know-how to come up with more creative ways to interface with people.
It's definitely had its positive takeaways.
Right? Speaking for myself, I think even when TFC goes back to singing live, we will probably have some Zoom meetings before our first rehearsal so that we kind of get to know one another and talk through the score. And so that first rehearsal doesn't have that kind of feeling out process of, oh my gosh,
Right.
For those of you out there who don't know, the Taylor Festival Choir is a group where there is a core of singers in Charleston, but a large number of the singers come from outside of Charleston. And we literally come together on a Thursday night, sometimes a Friday afternoon, and rehearse like crazy and give concerts Saturday night, Sunday afternoon. So you're talking about a really compressed amount of time. So I think these sorts of technologies might actually help us improve our offerings and deepen what we do even when we get back to singing live. So let me wrap up this conversation with talking about Serenade to Music briefly and just let y'all all talk about that. So most people who know me know that my two favorite composers are Johann Sebastian Bach and Ralph Vaughn Williams. I always like to say I think Bach is the greatest composer and Vaughn Williams is my favorite composer. Something about Vaughn Williams' music has hit my tuning fork in my soul from the first time I heard his music. I'm sure it's English folk music combined with Tudor Renaissance polyphony, combined with a certain romantic utterance and sweep, and just the utter Englishness of it all kind of came together to really speak to me. And I'm not even sure most of you know this, but one of the very first times that I knew that I wanted to be a conductor for the rest of my life was when I conducted Serenade to Music. I had gone back to do my doctorate in choral conducting, and I'm not sure I was really committed to being a choral conductor for the rest of my life. I had started out as a singer, and then I started conducting and took public school jobs, went back to get my doctorate, and I think maybe there was a little part of me that was doing that because I knew that I was good at it, and it just felt like it was what I was supposed to do. And then I put together a performance of Serenade to Music and Vaughn Williams' Dona Nobis Pacem. And I think in that performance was when I knew this is it. I'm going to conduct for the rest of my life. So the ironic thing is we were talking about, actually Stephen Hanna and Sarah Law originally approached me about doing a virtual project. And Sarah suggested Serenade to Music. And it didn't take much to talk me into Serenade to Music because I love it. It's a special piece to me, but I also knew it had a lot of solo opportunities. And I felt like that would give several of our singers an opportunity to sing in a choir, but also do something with their solo chops. So Serenade to Music means a lot to me. So somebody jump in and just talk about what singing this specific piece of music meant to you.
I didn't really have any experience with this piece. And I regretted that instantly when I started listening to it. I was like, how did I not know about this or delve into this deeper? Because it is just such a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of music. The text is amazing, and it was such a profound text because it's all about the importance of music, and what better, text than that for this time,
That's right, and that's why it was so perfect for this project. It's from The Merchant of Venice, which you wouldn't necessarily think would be offering up the perfect text for a pandemic, but there is a scene where they're just kind of taking it in, and they hear music wafting, and they just literally put together some utterances that only Shakespeare could offer that talk about the depth and the poetic nature of music.
the colors that Vaughn Williams creates in the choral and the instrumental part are so cool. And like Grace, I mean, I didn't know this piece, and hearing it for the first time, I was like, oh, so that's what we're doing. Okay.
Right.
And so it was just, while it was still recorded in my bedroom on my computer, it was still kind of a profound experience to be able to interact with it, even if it's not the way that I would really want to in general. So for me, it's just having the ability to still be able to do something like this is really fantastic this year.
So I've sung this piece twice before. Both times were actually in my undergraduate degree at New England Conservatory. We sang it as our senior convocation piece, and then we also sang it the year before for a group of the seniors that were graduating that year. And I remember the first time singing it being like, this is the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard. And exactly what Grace and Bates hinted on with the text just being so profoundly honest. And I remember, the couple of times that I've had the chance to sing this text, I'm like, this is what it's about. This is how at least I feel as a musician whenever I get the chance to perform, to create, and especially to create in a group. And for me, this text is really what being a musician encompasses. And it just kind of resonated with my soul. And I also, not to be super basic, but I just think it's the most beautiful music ever. I mean, it is so lush. Every time you hear it, you can't help but sort of get welly-eyed, just because there's real magic being created in these tones, in these words, and the way that everything is shaped gorgeously. It's just...
No, I completely agree. It is, it's overtly beautiful music. A lot of great music is intended to be expressive and perhaps pretty, perhaps beautiful, but being expressive is the most important thing. And there might be some harshness sometimes in that expressiveness. This particular piece of music is very obvious. Vaughn Williams was just sat down and said, I am going to write an overtly gorgeous piece of music. There's not going to be any harshness. It's just going to be pure magic. He wrote this for 16 specific opera singers that he knew personally in England. And those of you who haven't seen the score, Vaughn Williams actually put the initials by each part and each solo. So you know exactly who he wrote it for. And so Heldon Nash was like, HN, that's my solo. Now, again, Bill, I hate to keep asking you the instrumental questions, but in this project, you were the instrumentalist. And, you had the unenviable task of being the orchestra. You are not playing a piano part. You were playing an orchestral reduction, which included the violin solo and all the other orchestral colors. How in the world does a pianist go about tackling something like that?
I did a lot of listening to a lot of different versions, because there were so many different versions out there that were either full bigger orchestrations, or even smaller, or even piano and violin, even a small. And so I had to listen to a lot of different ones to figure out what I was supposed to be at any particular point in time, because it was I didn't, like a lot of you, I didn't know the piece all that well before having done this, and so to know when I was supposed to be the violin, which was very obvious in the score, versus when was I supposed to be an oboe, or when was I supposed to be the brass. I mean, like, there's the obvious brass fanfare.
Well, and I have a question about that, because I'm not a pianist. If you know you are the brass versus if you know you're an oboe, do you make a conscious decision to play it differently, or do you trust your subconscious to change the way you're playing it, but you simply do need to know?
I think it's probably more subconscious. I mean, I hear the instrument in my head, and so I think that after years of having thought about this and doing it, I think that, and hearing that in my head, I think subconsciously in some way, I think shapes what I'm doing. Brass is the most obvious one. Coming up with a little bit more of a harsher sound, coming with the piano that will be a little more brassy. But I don't know that I'm consciously thinking I need to physically do this to make that sound. I think it's more I hear that and knowing that that's the instrument, and I often am writing it in the music, what the instruments are, and I think that hearing it in my head, I think, leads.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the answer was more you got the information into your brain and then you trusted your subconscious to do the right thing, because you've just encapsulated my entire philosophy as a conductor, because that is what I do. I do as much score study as I possibly can do. I try to learn everything I can, and I'll make some conscious decisions based on that, but I also just trust my subconscious to make some decisions that I'm not even aware of. But I literally talk to my conducting students about feeding your subconscious. You want to be intuitive, but you want your intuition to have been fed information. You can't be intuitive based on nothing. It needs to be intuition based on knowledge. And so that I'm good to hear that. Well, Maurice, help me wrap this up, man. You are the other full-time conductor on this particular panel. And, Serenade to Music is a choral piece, but it also involves solo singing, and it's a lot of different things. And then we had to do it virtually. So just help me wrap this up, man, by some of your thoughts.
I have to admit as well that I was not as familiar with it, and I kicked myself probably about 10 times for not being familiar with it. I think a lot of what everybody has said so far, I think one of the things that really spoke to me was the fact that it's almost like Vaughn Williams is able to speak with all of those separate voices, but in such a uniform way that you don't lose the color of each of those individuals and their way of expressing and what they're expressing. And to me, that was incredibly intriguing. The other thing about that, at that time, that was a tough time for me because we weren't sure what was going to happen with our programs, if we were going to have them. That was right after I had lost my brother. So for me, the text was super important because I feel like it gave me hope, and it reminded me of this thing that I loved so much that really has been a source of pulling me through difficult times.
When Sarah and Steve and I first started talking about doing this project, Mary had just had her cancer surgery. She's now been 8 months cancer free, and we're going back for another scan. So thank you, God, for that.
At that moment in time, I needed to sing this piece because I needed to be reminded of music and its power and how it's honestly saved my life. And I think anybody that interacts with music would say that, not just us performers. I think people listen to music for those same reasons, that music literally helps them get through life.
I'm right there with you. And I think that is a great way to wrap this up. Serenade to Music has meant something special to all of us and everybody else in the project. I can tell you that it is my sincere hope to perform Serenade to Music live for audiences when TFC goes back into a live season. I just have to decide how we're going to do that. It is a piece for full, very large orchestra and 16 singers. I don't know if we'll be able to do it that way. We might do it with piano and violin. We might do it with a string orchestra. I don't know. But having done it virtually, I think gives us all a hunger to do it together live. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the singing, and I hope you'd enjoy these conversations, and keep coming back to Taylor Music Group, our online offerings, and I hope you enjoy these conversations and all of our music, and hopefully we'll see you live really soon. So thanks everybody.